I want you to try and visualize a specific span of time. We're going to do a little mental gymnastics here.
Okay.
Picture the entire history of the United States. That's roughly 250 years. Now multiply that by 10. That gets us back to, say, the Roman Empire. Now multiply that by 4.
And we are still nowhere near the time frame we are looking at today.
Exactly. We're talking about a civilization that lasted for 10,000 years. Not 1,000, 10,000. And here's the kicker, the part that makes your brain kind of short-circuit. For that entire duration, they didn't seem to progress in the way we usually define it. No massive empires, no towering monuments to god kings, no, rapid technological explosions that reshaped the planet.
Existence. For 10 millennia.
Yeah.
It sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? Or at least it sounds suspicious. When we look at history, we're trained to look for the narrative arc.
The rise and fall.
The rise and the fall. The graph goes up, the empire expands, it overreaches, it burns out, and the next one takes its place. It's a cycle of boom and bust. But today, we are looking at a massive structural anomaly. We are diving into the Jōmon period of Japan.
The Jōmon paradox. That's really the headline here. Because usually when a society doesn't move forward or scale up, we have names for it. We call it stagnant. We call it primitive.
Right.
But I feel like you can't call something that remains stable for 10,000 years a failure. If anything, we are the glitch compared to them.
That is the tension we need to sit with. And we're looking at the Jōmon period today, not just as a history lesson. We aren't going to be memorizing pottery styles or dates, but as a structural observation.
Okay.
We're using the Jōmon era to ground some very abstract, very fascinating concepts from a framework called Reflective Humanism, or RH.
All right, let's unpack this. Because the source material today is, well, it's pretty dense. It combines heavy-duty archaeology with this philosophy of reflective humanism. And the core question seems to be, how does a society stay stable for that long without turning into a totalitarian nightmare or just dying out?
It's an exploration of time, structure, and possibility. The Jōmon period presents us with a counter-narrative to everything we assume about how civilization must work.
So let's start with the basics, because I want to make sure I'm not just romanticizing a bunch of people living in the woods. Who were the Jōmon? Were they just simple hunter-gatherers who got lucky?
That's the common misconception.
Yeah.
They were hunter-gatherers, yes, but they were complex hunter-gatherers. They settled in permanent villages.
Oh, okay.
They built sophisticated longhouses. They created some of the earliest and most intricate pottery in the world. This wasn't a society surviving on the brink of starvation. They had culture, they had trade, they had art.
But they didn't have agriculture, right? At least not large-scale farming.
Not in the way we think of it, no. And that's usually the trigger for what we call civilization. You start farming, you get a surplus of food.
Right.
You need someone to guard the food, so you get soldiers.
Yeah.
You need someone to count the food, so you get bureaucrats. You need someone to tell everyone what to do with the food, so you get a king. That's the standard model.
Complexity equals hierarchy. More stuff equals more bosses.
Exactly. But the Jōmon break that rule. We see thousands of years of settlement, but we find almost zero evidence of a ruling class.
Really?
No palaces, no grand tombs filled with gold for the great leader, and even stranger, no evidence of large-scale warfare.
That's the part that stops me. 10,000 years without a war, that sounds, well, fake. Human beings are messy. We fight over parking spots. You're telling me they didn't fight over territory for 10 millennia?
There was likely interpersonal violence, arguments, feuds, but organized structural warfare. The archaeological record is shockingly quiet. No burned villages, no mass graves with arrowheads in the spines. It suggests that their order wasn't imposed from the top down by a guy with a sword. It was maintained laterally.
So if they didn't have a police force or a king or the threat of an army, how did it not just evolve into chaos? I mean, structurally, how do you keep people from killing each other for that long?
The sources suggest that order wasn't designed or enforced. It was maintained through tuning.
Tuning. That's a very specific word. It sounds like mechanics or music.
Think of the difference between a dam and a surfer. A dam is designed order. It's a rigid structure built to stop the river.
Yeah.
It forces the water to behave.
Oh, okay.
But eventually, if the pressure gets too high, the dam breaks. That's the collapse of an empire.
Right. And the surfer?
The surfer is tuning. The surfer is constantly adjusting their weight, their balance, responding to the wave. They aren't trying to stop the wave, they're aligning with it.
I see.
The source material suggests the Jōmon were a tuned society. They didn't try to freeze time or force a rigid structure. They adapted continuously.
So it wasn't that they didn't change, it's that the change didn't break them.
Correct. They developed pottery, they adapted to climate shifts, they changed their housing styles. But the change was never drastic enough to shatter the social container. It didn't create a break in time.
Okay, this is where I want to push back a little bit
Okay.
because tuning and adapting sounds nice, but isn't that just a fancy way of saying they moved slowly? I mean, in the modern world, we equate speed with success.
Of course.
If a company isn't growing 10x year over year, it's failing. Were the Jōmon just stagnant?
That's the intuitive reaction, right?
Yeah.
We're conditioned to believe that if you aren't climbing the ladder, you're falling off.
Right.
But the RH framework argues that we are confusing speed with advancement.
Explain that.
Well, expansion often brings friction.
Yeah.
It brings conflict. If you are constantly pushing boundaries, whether that's geographical territory or technological disruption, you are constantly colliding with something. You're colliding with nature, with other groups, or with the psychological limits of your own population. In this view, speed and instability are structurally linked. You cannot have high-velocity progress without high volatility instability.
So the Jōmon weren't behind. They were optimized for a different phase.
I would say they were playing a completely different game.
Yeah.
While modern civilization maximizes speed and output, the Jōmon civilization seemed to maximize time and endurance.
That is a fundamental shift in values. It's like, who won? The sprinter who broke the world record and then pulled a hamstring and retired at 25.
The hiker who kept walking for 80 years.
Right.
Structurally, the hiker wins the game of survival. If the goal of a civilization is to sustain life and well-being for as long as possible, the Jōmon are the undisputed champions. We've only been doing this industrial modern thing for, 200 years? And we're already worried about collapse.
Touché. But let's get into the mechanics of how we operate versus how they operated. The notes use this term gradients to explain the difference, and specifically collision-driven generation. That sounds aggressive.
It is aggressive, but it's also effective, at least for generating power. Think of a combustion engine. How does it work?
Explosions.
Right. You take fuel, you compress it, and you ignite it. You create a controlled explosion. That explosion drives the piston.
Okay.
That is collision-driven generation. It relies on a steep gradient, a massive difference between what is and what should be. We drive change through conflict. We smash ideas together in a debate. We disrupt industries. We force an update.
It's the move fast and break things mentality.
Exactly. And to close that gap, to climb that steep hill of progress, we force a collision. The RH framework calls this discontinuous generation. It's choppy, it's step A, then a boom, then step B.
Which explains why modern history feels like a series of shocks. We have the pre-internet world, then a shock, then the post-internet world. Now we're in the pre-AI shock. It doesn't flow, it snaps.
Right. And the byproduct of that snap, the heat generated by that friction, is what the source calls pain. And they aren't being poetic or metaphorical here. They mean structural stress. If you force a system, whether it's a society or a human brain, to change faster than it can naturally adapt, the structure cracks. That cracking sound is pain.
So when we feel burnout or that sense of, I can't keep up, that's not just a personal feeling, that's the heat from the engine.
Precisely. It is the necessary waste product of collision-driven generation.
Yeah.
You cannot have the explosion without the heat.
Okay, so contrast that with the Jōmon model, question-driven generation. How is that different from just sitting around and thinking?
Think of a garden instead of an engine. In a garden, you have growth, but you don't have explosions. You have a gentle gradient.
Okay.
You keep the interference, the difference between where the plant is and where it wants to be open. You don't force the flower open with pliers. You provide the conditions, and you allow the update to happen continuously.
Touching without touching too much. I saw that phrase in the text.
It's the ethics of non-interference. If collision-driven generation is about forcing the world to fit your model, question-driven generation is about observing the world and adjusting your model to fit the flow. It minimizes reaction. It minimizes that structural pain.
So Judgment Society wasn't just lucky to last that long. It seems like they had a social technology, maybe not written down in a constitution, but lived, that prioritized minimizing these conflict gradients.
It was a lived practice of keeping the questions open. They didn't rush to resolve every ambiguity with a rigid law. By doing that, they preserved the conditions for generation rather than forcing a specific output.
That is such a subtle distinction. We focus on the output, the new iPhone, the quarterly earnings.
Yes.
They focused on the conditions that allow the community to survive another 1,000 years.
And that requires a very different relationship with time. In the RH source material, there's this concept of interference and resonance. It says, truth is not a one-time point, but a superposition of orbits caused by interference.
Okay, you're going to have to translate superposition of orbits for me. That sounds a little like quantum physics.
It connects back to the idea of stability. We tend to think of stability as a destination, like once I get this promotion, I'll be stable,
Right.
or once we pass this law, society will be fixed. We view it as a point on a map.
To happily ever after.
Exactly. But in this framework, stability isn't a point, it's an orbit. It's a dynamic dance. The Earth is stable, not because it's sitting still on a shelf, but because it is constantly moving, constantly falling around the sun.
So, truth or a stable society isn't something you catch, it's something you maintain.
It's a movement that has to be sustained. And the Jōmon seemed to understand that the goal wasn't to reach the end of history, but to just keep the dance going.
It really challenges the idea that primitive means simple. To maintain that kind of balance for 10,000 years, that actually sounds like a highly sophisticated social inhibition technique.
I think inhibition technique is the perfect term. We often think ability is about what you can do. We have the technology to build a nuke, so we build it. But true mastery is often about what you choose not to do.
The discipline of restraint.
Exactly.
Oh.
The Jōmon had the capacity for violence, surely. They had the capacity to centralize power. Someone surely tried to be king at some point. But structurally, they inhibited those pathways because they recognized, perhaps intuitively, that those pathways lead to instability.
Huh.
They prioritized the orbit over the explosion.
Which brings us squarely to the present, because reading this, it's hard not to feel a little anxious about our current trajectory. We seem to be doing the opposite of everything we just discussed.
It is the mirror that the Jōmon paradox holds up to us, and it's not necessarily a flattering reflection.
The source mentions transparent pain. We talked about pain as the heat from the engine earlier, but what is transparent pain? Is that different?
It's the next level of it. Transparent pain is described as the friction between the external world's complexity and our internal processing. But the transparent part is key. It means we don't even notice it as pain anymore.
Oh.
We just think it's normal.
It's the background radiation of modern life.
Exactly. It's the feeling of doom scrolling at 11 p.m. It's the anxiety that you're missing something important because the news cycle moves faster than your brain can process.
The phase difference.
Yes. The external gradients, the speed of technology, the speed of information are so steep that our internal ability to tune ourselves just can't keep up. The world moves 1,000 steps while you sleep. You wake up and you're already behind. That gap, that's the pain.
And because everyone else is feeling it too, we just accept it. We think, well, life is just stressful.
But the source suggests this is a choice. Instability is a choice. That is the hard pill to swallow. We tend to think our instability, political polarization, environmental crisis, mental health burnouts are accidental bugs in the system.
Like, oh, if we just elect the right person, it'll calm down. Right. But the theory here suggests these aren't bugs. They are features of the gradients we chose. We chose high-speed, collision-driven generation. We chose to value the new over the enduring.
So the instability isn't a mistake.
No, it's the mathematical result of the slope we are standing on. You can't stand on a cliff and expect to feel like you're on flat ground.
Wow. So if we want stability, real stability, not just a temporary pause in the chaos, we have to redefine what stability even means.
We have to stop thinking of stability as not changing. The Jōmon changed. Stability means quality of endurance. It implies maintaining the environment where life can resonate, rather than forcing a specific output.
This brings me to that AI as atmosphere concept mentioned in the notes, because AI feels like the ultimate accelerator. It's the ultimate collision engine. But the notes suggest a different way to look at it.
This is the practical application. Usually we view AI as a tool to do things faster. Write the email faster, code the app faster. That just increases the gradient. It increases the speed, which increases the pain.
Right, the hamster wheel just spins faster.
But the health scan concept in reflective humanism suggests using these tools for observation, not just acceleration. Imagine using AI to observe your own thinking, to map the system, rather than to just force an output.
Treat the world and technology as an atmosphere to be observed, not a machine to be driven.
If we treat the world as a machine, we try to fix it with a wrench, we use force. If we treat it as an atmosphere like a climate, we tune ourselves to it, we adjust. It's a shift from control to resonance.
It sounds like we are talking about a massive shift in values. The source asks, are we accelerating change too aggressively? And I think the answer is obviously yes. But the harder question is, can we stop? Or at least, can we choose to slow down certain parts of our lives?
Can we choose different gradients? Can we create spaces in our society or even just in our own homes where we allow questions to sit, where we don't force a collision?
It's the difference between a debate and a dialogue. A debate is a collision. Someone wins, someone loses. A
Yes.
dialogue is a spiral. It goes up, but it doesn't break.
And that spiral structure is key to the RH philosophy. The notes mention the spiral as one of the three phases of interference, along with love and gratitude.
Okay, I have to be the skeptic again. Love and gratitude and a structural theory about civilization. That sounds surprisingly soft. It sounds like a greeting card.
Okay.
How is love structural?
I had the same reaction, but look at how they define them physically. Love is defined as the origin point, the 0 point of interference where connection happens. Gratitude isn't just an emotion, it's the vector. It's the direction that sustains the connection.
So gratitude isn't just saying thank you, it's a mechanism for continuity.
It's the glue. Think about it structurally. If you don't have gratitude, if you don't acknowledge the connection to the past or to the other person, the system breaks. It disconnects. Gratitude is the acknowledgement that a connection exists. That acknowledgement is what allows the system to endure over time.
Without that recognition, without touching too much, the system flies apart.
Exactly. The Jōmon structurally seem to have embedded this into their way of life. They lived in a way that acknowledged the continuity of nature and community rather
Yeah.
than trying to conquer it. They maintained the vector.
This brings me to that epiphany moment. We usually think of advanced civilization as one that has conquered nature, conquered time, beaten the game. But maybe an advanced civilization is one that has surrendered to the flow of time.
That is the Jōmon paradox. The civilization that didn't advance was the one that actually survived, the ones that advanced rapidly. The Assyrians, the Romans, the Mongols. They are all gone. We are digging them up.
And we are currently the ones advancing rapidly.
We are, and we are feeling the heat of that friction every single day.
So what does this all mean for the listener? Because we aren't going to move to the woods and start making rope pottery. We live in the modern world. We have jobs. We have iPhones.
No, and RH isn't about nostalgia. It isn't saying go back. It's about reflective humanism. It's about looking at the structure of how we live now. It applies to how we run our companies, how we raise our families.
Give me a concrete example.
Look at your own life. Where are you applying collision-driven generation? Where are you creating a steep gradient? Maybe it's in your career where you're forcing a result, pushing for a promotion that the system isn't ready for, and feeling that structural pain.
And the alternative.
Apply the question gradient. Instead of forcing the resolution, can you stay in the question? Can you lower the slope? Can you tune yourself to the situation rather than trying to break the dam?
It's about redefining progress.
Yes. Progress not as speed, but as the deepening of resonance.
I love that, the deepening of resonance. It's a shift from viewing life as a race to the top of a mountain to viewing it as a practice of endurance, like a long-distance runner versus a sprinter.
The sprinter looks impressive for 10 seconds. The runner is still there 3 hours later.
And the Jōmon were the ultramarathon runners of history.
They were. And they did it by not overexerting, by keeping the gradient gentle, by refusing to win.
They refused to win, and so they didn't lose. They simply endured. I want to leave everyone with the provocative questions from the source material because they really stuck with me.
They are questions worth sitting with.
First, what if civilizational value were measured by the quality of endurance, not speed? Imagine how different our news would look, how different the stock market would look if quarterly earnings were replaced by century-long stability.
And on a personal level,
Mm.
if we look at our own lives, which gradients should be reduced? Where are we forcing a collision at work, in relationships, where we could instead open a question?
And finally, which questions should be preserved? In a world that wants an immediate answer to everything, an immediate tweet, an immediate take, what is the value of keeping a question open, of letting it spiral up slowly?
That is the essence of the architecture of stability. It's the courage to remain in the question.
We're going to leave it there, not with a conclusion, but with space. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Thank you.